Is gearing up to be another big week in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. Testimony set to resume tomorrow.
No witnesses for the defense's case more. Digital evidence of prostitution and sex trafficking and new audio messages from the man at the center of this federal criminal case, Sean Diddy Combs. It is a full recap of day 28 of the trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law and Crime legal alert. If you received DPROPA, birth control shots, and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. That's right, Morgan & Morgan, they're investigating claims that patients were improperly warned about this risk. It's free to check. Takes a few minutes and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on screen, click the link below, or head on over to forthheeple.com/lesdio to see if you qualify. All right, so let's talk about what happened today in court. Day 28. Let me bring back in Law and Crimes in Court reporter Elizabeth Milner, who's been there every day for all of the testimony, all the action. Elizabeth, always great to see you. Thank you so much. So first up, we found out about scheduling, right? We found out when both sides are going to be finishing up, when the jury might be handed over the case. We even found out how long each side's going to have for closing arguments, which, by the way, I will tell you, I think it's one of the most important parts of this entire trial, given how complicated it is and how many different elements there are and how much the jury has to consider in putting it all into context. Closing argument is so important. So what do we learn about scheduling? Yeah. Well, we learned that this case is wrapping up very quickly. I think in a way that's kind of shocking to even myself, where it's like, oh my God, we're really at the beginning of the end, because from what both parties were explaining in court today, it seems like both sides are ready and geared up for closing arguments to happen as soon as Thursday. And yes, Jesse, both sides are going to have plenty of time to get their final message to the jurors before they go and deliberate. And so each side will have an abundance of time. It's pretty much 4 hours for each side. And so the day, as far as Thursday goes, it should take up most of the day for closings. Because at 4 hours each, that's 8 hours, probably a lunch break in between. So we should see you closings happen all day on Thursday. And then because they're going to be taking up most of the duration on Thursday, we can expect that the jury won't even get the case until Friday. And so things are moving pretty quickly now, whether or not the jury actually comes to a verdict on Friday. That's a wait and see, but for the most part, we can kind of finally see the beginning of the end with this case. Yeah, 4 hours each for closings. I think they'll probably want all that time
On Memorial Day, no doubt, when you could be doing a lot of other things. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. When we saw this testimony from Kid Cudi, how impactful?
Time. I know that the first thing that's going to happen after the defense, after the prosecution finishes up their case, the defense is going to have this Rule 29 motion, where basically after the prosecution, the government closes its case. They basically say, Judge, there's nothing for the jury to consider. You look at everything that was presented. You have to enter a judgment of acquittal on these charges because the evidence presented is insufficient to sustain a conviction, probably not going to be successful for them. And then you move into the defense's case, which, by the way, we found out about that too. I mean, there was a point when we thought the defense was going to call a number of witnesses. Is that not true anymore? Are they not calling any witnesses? Are they just putting on what exhibits or something? Yeah, it seems like there was kind of a lot of mixed messaging this morning in terms of whether or not the defense will call witnesses or whether or not they'll just put in a bunch of exhibits. And that'll kind of be the most of their case in chief, but from my understanding of it all, they still plan to call at least maybe one, maybe two witnesses. That is my understanding of everything. I know a lot of people would rather this case kind of wrap up and everything quickly, but it seems, again, from my understanding, that the defense, at least, plans to put on a couple of witnesses. Now, whether or not one of those witnesses is Sean Combs, I doubt that's going to happen, mainly because they planned on summations or closing arguments to be happening on Thursday. But initially, Jesse, they had kind of, I wouldn't say a laundry list, but they had a long, lengthy list of witnesses that they were possibly planning on calling. Now, obviously, that dwindled all the way down, and then initially, when we were kind of getting towards the end of the government's case, the defense was like, okay, we plan on calling Dr. Bard, we plan on calling Vasha, we plan on calling another witness. And then it seems like that three-person witness list already trickled down probably to maybe one or two of those folks, possibly Osa Dunlap, possibly Dr. Bard. So we'll wait and see when the defense takes over for their case, but for the most part, it seems like the defense case isn't going to be lasting as long as they initially anticipated when they initially thought it would be at least maybe 2 to 5 trial days. It seems like for the most part, it'll be just a day, maybe even a day and a half. Yeah, some outlets are reporting that the defense is not planning on calling any witnesses. So we're getting mixed messaging. I'm happy. If you were there too, like, straighten it out for us, because I'll tell you, I think it's interesting. If they call no witnesses or they call a limited amount of witnesses, it says something about how they feel about this case. They might feel that through cross-examination of key witnesses, key prosecution witnesses, and maybe just some of the text. Messages that came out enough reasonable doubt has formed. There's nothing more for them to do now. You talked about Sean Combs not taking the stand. Yay, as of right. Now, based on the scheduling, doesn't appear he's going to take the stand. However, he could wake up tomorrow. It's his decision and his decision alone. He could wake up tomorrow and say, no, I want to tell my side of the story. His attorneys can't stop him. He will take the stand. It's up in the air. Probably not going to do it, particularly after the scheduling today. But, we'll see. I've been shocked before. Maybe I'll be shocked again now, after all the scheduling now. After what we can anticipate for the rest of the week, we saw the continued testimony of this special agent. For Homeland Security investigations. This summary witness literally summarizing or condensing a lot of the digital evidence in this case, and it seems to me that the prosecutors are really trying to illustrate that this connective thread with Sean Combs, his associates, and Jane, it's alleged victim too in this case, to set up all these wild king nights. So you're really placing
that Kid Cudi had was saying that he saw Combs standing outside after that car was burned, looking like a supervillain, staying there with his hands behind his back. But I am curious about
not that he can't say.
There was
I don't know what was being set up on my behalf. I showed up at a hotel room and I'm shocked to find what I found. Not so quite, and it's either that he was an integral part of this, assuming at the very least. These were sites of prostitution, which is, transportation to engage in prostitution. The allegation being that he transported sex workers and alleged victims for the purposes of sex work, or at the worst case for him, that these are sites of sex trafficking. So Elizabeth, before we even get into the audio tapes of Sean Combs, I want to ask you about that separately so I understand. More flight records and the payment of travel, this was all discussed, as well as setting up the rooms for these sexual episodes, right? Yeah, absolutely. And so, Jesse, I will say this about some of the summary charts that the jury was able to see today. It was something that a lot of us in the gallery weren't able to see because it had a lot of sensitive information specifically relating to Jane, and so, unfortunately, for the most part, especially at the beginning of the day, we didn't see all of these charts and graphs that were all put together, but I was able to try to jot down as much as I could, especially as Marine. Kami was kind of going pretty fast with this witness, but for example, we heard about one particular kind of flight summary chart that was between September 24th of 2022 and September 25th of 2022. And the location was Mapleton Home, which is Diddy's residence over in Los Angeles, as well as in Vegas, to where the names associated with that particular time frame were Jane Sean Combs and Paul being an entertainer that Jane and Sean Combs would use in their hotel nights. And so the jury was able to see kind of financial records. That being $2,500 that was sent over to Paul on the flight. Records, I wasn't able to write it down as fast as I possibly could, but there were flight records that were attached to that, but then also there were just more charts just really talking about the payment. So, for example, there was one payment from September 17th of 2023 through September 19th of 2023. It was about a hotel booking, particularly the Trump Hotel in New York and the Whitby Hotel. Two of the names associated with that particular booking were Jane, Sean Combs, Robert, and Cabral. And then Jane, she had a flight out from LAX to JFK Cabral, from Atlanta to Newark, and then Newark back to Atlanta, where, the jury was able to see Venmo payments totaling $1,000 that was sent to Robert. Then they were able to see text messages. I'm associated with just kind of the financial records associated with Cabral, where Jane texted Cabral saying, "I'm going to check on the status of the cash for you." Then we see more things, or we hear about more charts that have to do with Jonathan Perez, one of Sean Combs' assistants. Jane and Cabral, it was assigned to the Trump Hotel room, 0508. The arrival date was around that same time frame, September 17th of 2023.